Coming up on today's edition of Vikings Now, we're going to be looking at the top cut candidates for this football team heading into the offseason. My name is Patrick Siepman, and welcome in. Obviously, these videos, aren't the most fun to make because you're talking about cutting players from your football team. But I think, financially, the Vikings have four names that I do think are fairly obvious, that they will get cut. And the one that hurts the most, but the one that, is most obvious is Harry the Hitman, Harrison Smith. I think he is number one, no doubt the top cut candidate for this football team. His base salary in 2024 is set at $14.5 million, and then if they would release him pre-June 1st, they would save $11.3 million on this year's cap. But if they release him post-June 1st, they would save $15.2 million. Obviously, if you cut him, it makes sense to cut him more post-June 1st, but their dead cap money would be split up in the 2024 and 2025. Where if you cut him pre-June 1st, it would just all be on the 2024 dead cap. But no doubt, Harrison Smith definitely lost a step this past season. And he had that one really good game against the Carolina Panthers where he was coming off the edge and Brian Flores was using him as that Swiss Army knife. He was lining up at D tackle that game. He was lining up at edge, linebacker, nickel corner, whatever it may be. Harrison Smith was all over the field, but in terms of just his overall, athletic ability and just his overall play, he's definitely lost a step. He's not the same guy that he was in years past. And also, shout out to Rick Spielman to signing him to that ridiculous contract extension 2 off seasons ago, and now that's a big reason why he may be cut. But also another big reason why he may be cut is the safety trio that I think is really emerging in the National Football League. Josh Metellus, he was the only defender in the NFL this past season to play every single position on defense. Absolutely incredible. He impressed me so much. He is the definition of a versatile football player, and we know how much, a guy like Brian Flores values that. Jay Ward, our rookie last season out of LSU, didn't play too much, but in limited reps, he looked great. And I would love to see him, continue to develop once Harrison Smith does get cut. Then Cam Bynum, I thought he's been great this past season. He was great his rookie year. He was originally drafted as a corner, shifted to safety, and he really came onto the scene strong during his rookie campaign. Kind of took a step back during his sophomore year, but hey, in his third season, he really did pop out. So I think these three are also another big reason why I would be okay with cutting Harrison Smith. But man, let's just take a little trip back down memory lane real quick. Just looking at his career numbers for the Vikings, I mean, just ridiculous. That the fact that the 4 stats I chose for a safety to show right now are tackles, sacks, interceptions, and touchdowns. The fact that he filled up the stat sheet in all 4 of those just speaks to the player he is. I mean, he was incredible under Mike Zimmer specifically. I mean, him and Harrison Smith, it was just a perfect combination for those two. He was an absolute beast with the Vikings, over 1,000 tackles in his career, 19.5 sacks, 34 interceptions, and 4 touchdowns. I hate saying that the Vikings should cut him, but it may just be one of those things. It comes down to the numbers. It comes down to the financials. And Harrison Smith, for me, number one cut candidate this season for the Minnesota Vikings. But even though I'm talking about cutting him, I do want to show him some love on today's video. So if you guys want to show Harrison Smith some love, go down there, like today's video, show the Hitman, show number 22 your support, because I think we might have seen him play his last football game in the purple and gold. But go down there, like today's video to show Harrison Smith some love. Harrison to another Harrison Phillips here. I think he's a big cut candidate as well. Number 2 for me, his base salary, pretty simple, $6.5 million this season. You release him pre and post June 1st, you will be saving $6.5 million, and maybe the Vikings, choose to do so. And listen, Harrison Phillips was not bad this past year by any means, but he wasn't great, and he was kind of the focal point of that defensive line. And obviously, the Vikings' run defense, wasn't too good this season. You can chalk it up to the linebacker play. You can chalk it up to to whatever it may be. But I think a big part of that does fall into the main guy on that defensive line. PFF graded him out pretty middle of the pack at 59.7, run defense 65.6, pass rush at 53.6, giving him 62 tackles and 4 sacks on the season. But I do think you can move off him, and I think you got a ton of great options that you could, replace him with in free agency. I would like to see the Vikings eventually kind of go all in on a defensive lineman. They tried to do that with Michael Pierce a couple of years back, but it just did not work out. For Michael Pierce, and now he's back, in Baltimore. But a guy like Chris Jones, Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams, DJ Reader, these are all guys that I would love the Vikings to sign. If you could somehow, I think Chris Jones will stay in Kansas City, but if you could somehow get Christian Wilkins, It's kind of my main guy that I want the Vikings to sign because, he adds a sort of a swagger to the defensive line. I think the Vikings have been a soft football team over the past couple of seasons, and adding a guy like Wilkins, I think would just add a little more oomph to that side of the football and add a little more juice to it. So, listen, those are 5 options that you could use to replace a guy like Harrison Phillips, but I definitely do think he, more likely than not, that he will be cut this offseason. But if you guys want to stay up to date on anything around this football team, if Harrison Smith, Harrison Phillips, whoever it may be, does get cut from this roster, we'll have a video for you guys out as soon as possible. So hit that subscribe button. Lock us in as your go-to Vikings YouTube channel. There's a ton of great YouTube channels out there that cover the Vikes, but I want to be your go-to one. So hit that sub button and lock us in. Another defensive lineman for the Vikings, Dean Lowry, who was signed last season from the Green Bay Packers. And the Vikings, they could save $4.4 million if they release him pre-June 1st and $3.8 million if they release him post-June 1st, and his base salary is $3.7 million. Listen, Dean Lowry was, he was all right this past season, but again, he didn't live up to that contract they signed him to in the offseason. And whether it's free agency, NFL draft, trade, whatever it may be, the Vikings need to address the defensive line. I mean, I'm just sick of having, one of the worst groups in the NFL for the past couple of seasons. Kwesi has just yet to address it in the draft or, barely in free agency with, Dean Lowry and Harrison Phillips being the 2 signings. But I got two guys in the draft that, maybe it would be a total reach to take them at 11. But maybe the Vikings are saying, hey, we want to get aggressive, and maybe they take a quarterback at 11. And they're saying, hey, I want to trade back up into the first round and get a really, blue-chip defensive lineman. Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, great option. And then T'Vondre Sweat out of Texas. These 2 are mammoths of a human being, very similar to like the Patrick Williams and Kevin Williams, defensive linemen that the Vikings had in years past. So these 2 guys, A-plus, blue chip players that the Vikings can draft on this offensive line. But before we get into more cut candidates around the Minnesota Vikings, I want to tell you guys about this great deal we have going on at chatsports.com/Vikings hoodie, where hoodies are up to 50% off right now. We got all types of options. It's still cold up there in Minnesota, so if you guys want to rock the Vikings and stay warm, make sure you guys check out that link. It's going to be in the comment section and description of today's show. Chatsports.com/Vikings hoodie. Get hooked up today. It's cold in Minnesota. If you guys want to stay warm and support your football team, make sure you guys do so. Chatsports.com/Vikings hoodie. Hoodies are up to 50% off. All right. Third one for me, Byron Murphy as my third cut candidate for the Minnesota Vikings. This one's tough here, trying to cut Byron Murphy, but I think it makes sense. And, his base salary right now is $4.5 million, and if you release him pre-June 1st, you would save $4.5 million as well, but post-June 1st, you would save $8.7 million. And listen, you may be saying, why would the Vikings cut Byron Murphy? Look at their cornerback room. They don't have a lot of options. They only have 5 corners heading into next season as it stands right now, and there's really only 2 of them that, I would feel confident at setting out there on the football field, and that's Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman. And obviously Andrew Booth, is starting to look like a bust at this point. And, Najee Thompson, the UDFA from this past season, he's just a special teams demon. He's not going to get consistent reps in the secondary for the Vikings next season. But kind of gets me to this. The Vikings can't afford to cut him. I understand that, he had a couple of shaky games. DJ Moore cooked him for 150. Keenan Allen cooked him for over 200 yards. But overall, I just don't think the Vikings can afford to cut him. Maybe he may not be a true cornerback 1, but I do think he will be a hell of a cornerback 2, cornerback 3 maybe. But I just think, the Vikings, it would just be a bad decision if they would release him. And honestly, also the defense was terrible after he got hurt in Week 15. When you asked Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman to kind of be the 2 cornerstones of that secondary, it did not go well. Listen, the Lions absolutely cooked the Vikings secondary last game of the or 2 of the last 3 games of the year. Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, they just cooked that secondary, obviously with Byron Murphy being out. But there are options to replace him in free agency. I do expect the top 2 guys right here to go back to the respective ball clubs in Jalen Johnson and Ladarius Sneed, but also Kendall Fuller. He could be a sneaky option. Stephen Gilmore and Adoree Jackson, they're more cooked products, I would say, compared to back in their prime, but, they're solid veterans that maybe Flores would like to have an older player back there in that secondary. They could be also options. Also, this year's draft, you got guys like Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry. There's a ton of great options for the Vikings out there. But, these are 5 guys that I think could be options to replace Byron Murphy or just add some more juice to that secondary. But let me know, who do you guys think the Vikings will cut this offseason? I think it's going to be Harrison Smith, man. If I had to just choose one name, it's probably going to be Harry the Hitman. Hate to say it, but it just makes too much sense financially. But let me know, who do you think the Vikings will cut? And if they cut any of those guys, we'll have a video for you guys as soon as we can. So make sure you lock us in, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 23,000 subs here on the channel. Subscribe today. See you guys next time. Let's go Vikes.